Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing the film The Color Purple. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Color Purple.
A woman faces many hardships in her life, but ultimately finds extraordinary strength and hope in the unbreakable bonds of sisterhood.
All right. And in Movies and Us tradition, we will kick off with our one-sentence summaries for The Color Purple. Sarah, what was yours?
Mine is support Black-owned businesses.
Yes. I love that. Yes. Mine references a Black-owned business, and my one-sentence summary is Black womanhood is as multifaceted and stunning as the fabric array in Miss Seeley's Fancy Pants store.
Ooh, yes. Love it. I almost mentioned pants in mine, so I'm glad that you got that in there too.
Yes. All the colors, all the textures, all of the fabric types.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah, those really, really bright ones. Like, wow, this is quite something.
Yeah, with the really vibrant patterns. Those look fun. Those are your fun going out pants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always important to have.
Yes. Okay, let's start off with our initial thoughts of The Color Purple, and then we will include a spoiler, and then we'll have full reign to discuss all of the parts of the film. But at a high level, Sarah, I'm intrigued to hear how The Color Purple worked for you.
Yeah, I was a little, I guess I would say apprehensive about this movie at first, just because I am very particular when it comes to movie musicals. I have strong opinions about musicals. I love musicals a lot, and I don't always love movie adaptations of musicals. But The Color Purple nails it. This movie is such a fun time, and it recreates the magic of the theater, but on the big screen. And I think that it was so smart that they included, previous cast members of The Color Purple in this film adaptation. And I think that really lends itself to just being such a high quality production. But it's stunning. It's gorgeous. The dance numbers are fantastic. The musical arrangements are just breathtaking. The story is obviously fantastic. Like, I had such a good time with this movie, and I'm real salty with the Academy right now because for The Color Purple to only garner one whole nomination, are you kidding me? No, this movie was robbed, and I am annoyed that the Academy missed this so badly.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about that whole piece because we have many thoughts about that front. Yeah, as you know, I am not a musicals person in general. And so I was a little worried going into this. I was also just, careful in my excitement for this because sometimes it's just hard to do book to film adaptations, let alone musical to film adaptations. Like both of those two things are notoriously so difficult to do. And there's still aspects of this film that I think could have been stronger in some of the filmmaking components. And I think overall, what captivates me most about this film is the story. And so I went down a whole rabbit hole in my brain around like, man, this is working for me, but it's really the story that's working for me. And the filmmaking's fine. It's solid. The cinematography is like, okay. The editing, all of that stuff is like, it's fine. It's good. But I think that there's a version of this that could be better. And I think there are moments in this film that really worked well and use the power of the film as a medium in order to highlight certain aspects and emotional beats that you just can't do in a stage production. And man, I think that those aspects could have been littered throughout this film because they would add so much to the story. But overall, like, this is a powerful story. And I appreciate that the film doesn't shy away from some of those harder moments. And I think it makes a lot of those moments where there is a moment of joy or a celebration or laughter just feel that much more potent because you really sit with and experience so much of what these women go through. So I kind of applaud this movie for not shying away from some of those hard things. I was kind of worried that this would be maybe a overly glossy version of this story, and I was kind of surprised and shocked in some of those early sequences that, like, oh no, they're going for it and they are full on committed to it. And that was a pleasant surprise. Didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question. What is your knowledge or exposure to the original novel
Mm.
and the 19, I think it was 85 movie?
I hadn't experienced either of those. So I was going in real fresh, white canvas. And so much of these characters and this story were like I was experiencing for the first time. And it sucked me in. And I didn't expect it to. In the first like 10 minutes of the film, I was like, oh, like I think this will be fine. This will be solid. But by the end, I was so invested in these women and who they were and their stories and their outcomes, like full on sucked in. And I was kind of surprised at how much this movie moved me. What about you?
Oh, yes. I so I was going to do my homework and I watched the previous movie version like a week ago because I was like, okay, I need to know this. I had thought that I had read The Color Purple in like high school. I
Mhm.
was very wrong. The moment that the movie started, I was like, oh no, I haven't read this. So now The Color Purple is at the top of my to read list.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole time I was watching the 2023 version of The Color Purple, I was also comparing and contrasting it with the previous movie version,
Oh,
which was
yeah.
also really it was just an interesting exercise because the two are so different, and even though both of them are based on the same novel, they emphasize certain things or they de-emphasize others, so it's really fascinating the differences between the two. But yeah, I love that this musical doesn't, like you said, it doesn't shy away from the tough things because there's a lot of really really hard
Really hard.
things that
Mhm.
these characters go through, and like you said, those hard moments help make the joy even more infectious and even more joyful. So I think it's so smart, and I love that they took this book and they made it into a musical to
Mm.
begin with. I
Mm.
think that that is such an interesting creative choice, and I think it's also so compelling, especially the types of music that are involved and how much, Black people have used music in these tough
Mhm.
times, and how things like blues and jazz help, like, those were birthed out of the Black community in really really difficult circumstances. So it only makes sense that those styles of music would be so woven throughout the story, and we see that captured beautifully in the movie. So it's such a creative way to tell this story, and I love that. That's so fun.
And an incredibly difficult task too, like to put to music the emotions of moments is no small task, especially for something that has already been established as a standalone story. Like it's I imagine a very similar hurdle for book to film adaptations, which is just like, this is not how I read that scene or that moment or what those words would have been. And for them to be able to do that and put to music the emotions that are being felt, I just thought it added such another layer of expressiveness for the story and for these characters. Like, some of my favorite musical bits were just the women singing about their feeling at that moment. And man, it was so powerful. And I mean, I think it would have worked great as a film, but there's this whole other layer of artistic expression that the movie was able to tap into. Um, really, really almost like added a whole nother dimension to the experience of the story.
Yeah, and that's how I felt too, comparing this to the previous film. I don't know, it feels unfair to compare the two because they are so different. One is a film and one is a musical. Um, but I really loved that the musical elements of this film, like you said, it added so much to it. So you already have this incredibly powerful story, these really dynamic and interesting characters that you want to follow, and then you layer upon it this really captivating music, these beautiful dance numbers, like all of this to just, I don't know, it helped me be even more immersed into this world. And I already empathized with Celie and was moved by her story, but this using the musical as a vehicle to tell this story helped immerse me in her world even more than if this had just been like a regular film.
You are much more well versed in musicals and that whole genre, but I thought it was interesting that the film, musical film, whatever we want to call this thing, um, it doesn't lean on the musical numbers to tell the story. And sometimes musicals often will do that, and there's much less dialogue. Whereas this really felt like a film with these musical numbers, really elevating moments and kind of adding, uh, you know, turning up the saturation for an emotional moment, whether it was a joyful moment and them dancing, or it was someone lamenting and weeping and expressing that through song. I just thought that the choice to not litter this story with musical numbers left and right was just an interesting choice. The level of like restraint that they had to not turn everything and tell the entire story through the musical um, format, I thought was really smart. So when those moments came, I was like, oh, like this is a moment we need to sit in, and time is being slowed down in the from the perspective of this story and this narrative arc for us to sit with this character right now, or these characters right now. And just like the intentionality of when they chose to like pivot to a musical bit and then pivot back was much less than I was expecting going into this. I thought it was going to be a lot more song and dance, and it's actually a lot less than I expected.
Yeah, me too. I expected it to be like primarily singing. I
Yeah.
haven't seen The Color Purple, the musical, so I
Mm.
wasn't quite sure what the balance was going to be. Um, but yeah, I loved the way that they incorporated song because it also, I don't know, I feel like sometimes in movie musical adaptations, it's like talking, things are normal, and then all of a sudden we're singing, like, and it just feels completely wrong, like a musical number
Yes.
just comes out of nowhere.
Yes.
Uh, and I didn't feel that as much with The Color Purple. I think there was only like one song that I was like, oh, why are we doing this? But then the song was really good. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll forgive it. But for the most part, it felt like this beautifully integrated way to get into, like you were saying, this character's mind or what these characters are feeling or experiencing. It's hey, we're doing this not just because we like to sing and dance. We're doing this to get you to pay even more attention. We're doing this to make you feel more deeply than you could if we were just sitting here talking. So pay attention. And I think that was just so smart and also so effective. Because anytime somebody would start singing, I was like, oh yes, I'm way more dialed in now. So I don't know. It worked so well for me.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that I think really worked well about the musical numbers is that the tonal quality of each woman is so different, and it
Oh,
fit their
yes.
personalities so well. Like how that the alignment there, I think really, really, I don't know, it's the cherry on top, that little detail around the fierceness and the grit of Sophia's voice is so different from the way that Celie sings, and the more softer, more tender quality of her voice, just her singing voice. So that alignment, I thought, painted such a like kaleidoscope picture of these women are so different from each other, and yet they have so much in common, and they see and they recognize and celebrate each other's differences. It really was this beautiful spectrum of the different ways of being a Black woman. And I thought their voices just highlighted that so much more. Like it just, again, turns the saturation up.
Yeah, yeah, and then even the way that you can see their character development in like over the course of the movie in the songs that they sing and how they sing too, because the songs that like Suge is singing at the
Mm,
end of the movie are very different than what she was singing at the beginning. Same thing with Celie, she is singing
yeah.
very differently, and so I think that makes it even more powerful. Like, yes, we have watched her uh grow and transform over the course of the film, but we're also hearing her sing very differently, and we're her tone changes, her like the dynamics change, and then obviously the subject matter of the songs change as well. It's just so well done that each of these songs are so well integrated into who these characters are and what they're experiencing, that they just feel natural to be coming out of them.
That's such a good point that I don't think I realized so crisply, but you're so right that the arc that the character goes on is so aligned to the bigness or the smallness, the expressiveness or the tenderness of the songs that they sing. Um, that's a fabulous point because you're right. Like we see Celie come out of her shell and blossom and finally assert herself, and the way that she sings is so much bigger and brighter and more expressive. And it almost kind of in the opposite way, we see the way that what's her face, Shug, um, starts out with this charisma and this showmanship, and she knows how to work a crowd. And yet, that final song that we see her sing is her with her father, and it's so small and understated and quiet in nature. Just the two of them in an empty church, like the place that they are singing, and also the way that they are singing is so different. That's a fabulous point. Oh my gosh, yeah, I love that.
This movie is so smart. It's oh my gosh, it's incredible. And like to your point earlier, you know, adapting a book to a movie is very hard. Adapting a book to a musical is very hard. Adapting a musical to a movie is very hard. So every aspect of this film is hard to do. And yet it excels. You know, there's some moments that I don't think landed quite as well as it could have, but on the whole, this movie is fantastic and it's so intentional. And I'm so impressed at what it was able to communicate, and how much it gets you into the world of Celie, and just being on this journey with her in a way that I don't know is very impressive and very hard to do. So I everybody needs to watch The Color Purple. Even if you're not a musical person, even if you are a musical person, like watch The Color Purple. This is a powerful film, and it's absolutely worth watching and just celebrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And one other point, which we kind of made earlier, but I just want to circle back to around the music and the way that it adds to the story is that sometimes, like these stories and films about topics like this can lean so heavily into the gravity of what happened in history and the experiences of these women and just the toil and the mental burdens that they carry. And I think that this film does such a good job of balancing the joy and the camaraderie and the community that they feel, and also all of the things that are so burdensome about the things that they endure. And I think that the music really helps that keep that balance, because we get those moments to breathe, to come up for air, to celebrate a moment with them, and I think that it makes this film much more like dynamic and less one toned, and I think that really adds to this landing really well, versus staying within this one tone and one mood throughout the whole way through, just perhaps less accessible and less palatable for like a mass audience that should see and experience these women's stories.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I gosh, I don't remember what movie it was now that we reviewed recently. We've just reviewed too many things. I'm losing track, but I love that this year so far we've been able to review multiple movies that really highlight and center like Black joy, and I think that this movie is like pinnacle of that. You know, we see the difficulties, but we also see that joy, and I feel like uh, we're seeing that the stories of Black people aren't limited to what we've always been fed. It's not limited to the slave narrative. It's not limited to, you know, violence in the inner city. It's not limited to gangs, but there is so much to explore, and there's so much for Black storytellers, Black directors, Black actors, Black musicians, like, to express to the world. And I love that we get to see a movie like this that is not focused on, of course there are difficult things that happen, but it's in the midst of that that they are choosing joy. They're choosing togetherness. They're choosing to support one another. They're choosing that love and that bond and that sisterhood and all of these things. And so I love that this in many ways to me feels like this subversive movie. You know, it breaks out of so many of the boxes that I feel like are so well established both in musicals and in movies, and is saying no, we don't need to do what's always been done. It feels like this is like a movie with like Suge's ethos of like, we don't need to do what everybody's doing. You know, we can do what is true. We can do what is right to us. And I love that this is breaking out of the mold, and it's so exceptional. It's so captivating. I I love it. I want more things like this.
Yes, no, that's so true. And it's breaking out of the mold without going all the way to the other side. And
Yeah.
having that pendulum swing to this glossy, version. No, it can hold both things at the same time. And that is hard to do. And this movie does that really well. And I think what's also, fascinating about the way this movie is constructed is that we almost pendulum swing back and forth between those two things also incredibly quickly as well, which is perhaps it was initially such a jarring experience, and I was like, oh, like this is really intense, and all of a sudden we're in the next scene and all the mood is totally shifted. But isn't that life? Like there's these moments of pain, and then the next moment you are giggling out with your friend about something to like try and keep moving forward. And I love that this movie is unafraid to like cut quickly between these tones and not give us this transition and these long stretches of one tone. No, like we are bouncing everywhere and back and forth all the time, and sometimes in a most jarring way, but ain't that life?
Yeah. Yeah, and really exemplifying that like two things can be true at the same time. You know, like this can be a really difficult moment. Like that language fails to capture what some of these characters go through. And yet there can be goodness, or there can be joy in the midst of that. And I think that this movie does a really good job of showing us that you can hold two things together at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. I have to say, I really underestimated this movie going in. My guard was up. I was like, this is this is smelling a little bit like a Hollywood rendition of this classic story and
Mhm.
this important story, and I'm worried that they're gonna butcher it. And I'm pleasantly surprised they did it. But I was cautious going in, very cautious.
I really love that this musical has won you over.
It
That
really does.
warms my little theater kid heart.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, I had a note here like did this being a musical add to the movie or not? And I'm squarely in the camp of like it did. And sometimes it feels can feel shoehorned in when they take stories and turn them into musicals, and you're like, okay, here's the fun number just to make this a fun little musical segment. But I think Mean Girls, the latest Mean Girls, does that. I haven't seen it, but the latest Mean Girls remake is apparently a musical. It just doesn't need to be sometimes, but this one really, really does. And it's fascinating that you got to experience the earlier film version of this, and was able to see kind of the differences in approach and how that translates to your experience of the movie.
Yeah, yeah, it was really interesting to see where the two differ. Like obviously like the plot is the same. Uh but both movies choose to focus on different things sometimes. Like one movie glosses over like one pretty
Mm,
big plot point, and then the other movie is like, oh no, we're going to fully explain this plot point. So that was actually really helpful for me, because there were some things in the earlier version that I was like, wait, this this doesn't make sense. We have
mm.
glossed over some information that I need. And then the musical goes a little bit more deeply into it. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand now. So it makes me even more eager to read the book and
Yeah.
to really see uh, all of those nuances in there, and then be able to really better see how each film takes some creative liberties in certain directions. But both of them, I mean, the main plot points are largely the same. So that was really great to see. And just again, it was fun to kind of dissect, like, ooh, why did you
Mm,
deviate here? Or why did you focus on this instead of this? It's just interesting to think about.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's include a spoiler alert here so that we can talk about all of those things, including some of those plot points that potentially have surfaced up in some and not the others. So, if you haven't seen The Color Purple, it is available on Max. So, we recommend if you have Max, check it out. If you don't get Max, watch this movie. It is an important film. It is such a meaningful one, and we can't rave about it enough. Okay, let's dive in fully. We have full free reign over get to talk about this film. What's something that kind of was a big thought that you were having over the course of this film, or something that you've been mulling on since the film wrapped up after you finished watching?
Yeah, I so something that I've been thinking about that I really appreciate about uh the 2023 movie is that there's not a lot of white people in this movie.
Mm,
Um in the earlier version, the scene with Miss Millie is longer, and then there's like another scene after that that is really uh quite traumatic what happens. And so like obviously like white people aren't the main focus of the earlier film, but there's a lot more white people in that.
mm,
Um, and that's not the case in this version of The Color Purple. And I love that they intentionally chose to do that so that there's really no way that this can become about white people. And I love that,
mm,
because for so long everything we have made about white people, and that's just not the case. So I love that they chose, even in the moments when like a white person is involved in the scene. Obviously the Miss Millie scene is very pivotal, so you have to see what happens. A lot of times outside of that, you almost see the effects of the white system. Like you can hear the jailer's voice, but you don't see him. Or you can see what happens after everything with Miss Millie, but we don't have to see her again. And so I loved that this film was like, no, we
mm.
know who this movie is about. We know who this story is about. And so we are going to choose to center on them, because that is the most important thing.
That's so good. Yeah, yeah. Because the center of the story, like you mentioned, is these people, and it's I think so many films that we've seen can often focus on the dynamic between these two people groups, right? And then that becomes the backdrop, and it kind of inches forward to become in the foreground. And this film really puts these women at the center. Like we get to sit with them, we get to know them so deeply, and it's honestly more about the relationship that they have actually with each other more than it is about the relationship
Mhm.
in the larger society. And you're right, the first white person that we see in this movie doesn't come until like 2/3 of the film is past, and I thought that was such a smart choice. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great observation. So something that I was really mulling on after the film ended is this 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 emphasis that the film or this theme that the film circles around in each of the characters with their relationship to their larger families, and specifically like their family line. It's often focused in the context of like their parents and the effects of their parents on them, and the things that are passed down or not passed down. And I think this has been a theme that has been in the larger discourse right now in general around things that are passed down from generation to generation. But I love that in this film you see two versions of things that are passed from one generation to the next, and some good, some bad. So in Celie's character, we get to see her um, really come into her own when she starts her business, Miss Celie's Fancy Pants. And I love that her skill set in being able to sew and create clothing was given to her by her mother. And the movie starts with that, and then you see that thread line throughout the film. It's a way that Celie has to take care of and show her love for the people around her. There's a really beautiful scene where she goes to see Sophia at the county jail, and she, oh no, it's after Sophia gets out of jail, and Celie has created and woven this sweater for her, and it's kind of maybe like a quick little moment, but it just carries so much meaning knowing that that skill set that she had was given and passed down to her by her mother. And then similarly, kind of the opposite version of this is you see the thread line between Mister and his father, and that like his father really doesn't need to be in this story. And for some of those scenes when he shows up, like those scenes honestly could work just as well without him. But I thought it was so intentional for this film to include the story from the original novel to include the presence of Mister's father, because you then can see him through the lens of he has been steeped in this from a young age, and this is where it comes from him, and he now has a choice which we see him make on breaking those patterns and doing better for his next generation. And so Harpo is again another character that's kind of on the peripherals. He's a side character for a lot of these scenes, but I feel like he really represents that continuation of the healing and redemption of so many of these patterns that have been entrenched in this family line that are now being broken for the next generation to come. So it was fascinating just to see that how much, while we get to know these characters, we actually get to know these characters and their larger family lines as part of context for who they are. It felt like just such a thread that stood out to me throughout watching this film.
Yeah, so I read this on IMDb, so like take it with a grain of salt. But in an interview, Taraji P. Henson said, "You see celebrities and athletes saying, 'I'm going to take a break for my mental wellness.' We've never seen anything like this before, and this movie is going to only shed more light on why we need to heal and break these generational curses."
Mm.
And so I think that she is absolutely like picking up what you're talking about. We see what these families have gone through and how they have passed down those unhealthy things to their descendants. And I mean, not even getting into like things like slavery and how that
Mm-hmm.
affects the people's ancestors who went through that. Like it's all wrapped up in everything, and we pass on more to the next generation than we realize. And so I love that this movie, like you said, is shining light on that and is also showing the redemptive part of it. We see that in Harpo. He makes wrong decisions and he tries
Mm-hmm.
to be like his dad, but then he grows over the course of the film. Even Mister, which is one of the issues that I had with the earlier
Yeah.
film is they don't really explore his redemptive turn, so it feels like out of nowhere in the earlier film, but they do a much better job in this film showing how Mr. grows and changes. And then, like you said, we see Celie, who becomes
Mm.
herself, instead of this shell of who she used to be. So I love that this film is, I don't know, man, like I think that musicals are so powerful, and it gives you this opportunity to be fully immersed into this world and maybe explore themes in a way that you might not otherwise, because it's being expressed through song. And I feel like this movie does that so well in showing how these characters are growing and how they are healing. And I feel like
Mm.
this is a super important movie, not just to be, you know, more aware of the Alice Walker novel, which we should be, we should read more classic Black literature. Hello.
Mm.
But also just to understand the power of community and the power of healing, and how we do have agency and we can do better than the previous generation. And that's all wrapped up in this incredibly beautiful, meaningful movie.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true. And I think that that theme of the sisterhood and the community that these women have with each other, it's so integral for the growth that each of them have. And we see their arcs come to full fruition so that by the end of the film, their growth feels so earned. Like, I don't know, sometimes with films, you get to the end, you're like, oh, this character grew, and like that's very wonderful. I actually felt a little bit with like that with Mister's character. It was a little too fast for me, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, oh, this is a major transformation.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
because Yo Crops didn't grow for this year. Like, okay, I don't know if I buy it fully. But for these women, like they almost begin to be inspired and take the best traits of each other and like rub off on each other in these really fascinating ways. Like I think um the 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 conversations that Sophia has with Celie early in the film really seed the future growth and kind of courage that Celie begins to adopt to stand up to the abuse that she's experiencing. And Sophia models that for her. And in the moments where Sophia is kind of a shell of herself after coming out of prison and unable to like reconnect and reignite that fire in her, it's in the moment where Celie stands up to Mister that then you see Sophia almost like come back to life. Like she's like a plant that's been wilted and like fully is
Mhm.
back to her normal self. And it's in the place and in the moment where she sees Celie's tenacity that she actually originally was able to inspire and help grow in Celie. So it's just this beautiful symbiotic like loop of feeding each other, lifting each other up when they're down. That I thought was just like so set, like it's the perfect picture of the way that true good pure community can look like, and the amazing effects that come from seeing others that are not like you, being inspired from them, seeing them model it, and then beginning to let a little bit of that rub off on you.
Yeah, yeah, and the way that Celie is so sheltered is the wrong word, but like she is put into a box. Her dad, I guess her stepdad, put her into a box, and then she was given in her box to Mister, and she
Mm-hmm.
remained in that box, and all she knew was that box. And so then she meets characters like Sophia and Shug, and that box starts to break a little bit, and she realizes that there are other ways to be, and there are other ideas in the world, and things are bigger than this little box that she has been put in by others. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really cool to watch that transformation happens, because it happens pretty slowly. honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that she takes little baby steps as she learns that she has agency and she can make choices and she can choose something other than what has been scripted for her. And it's just so cool the way that these three women, their stories really weave together beautifully. And like you said, it's not just Celie that learns. Obviously, she's our main protagonist, so she goes through the most growth. But these other two women also learn from each other, and they learn from Celie too. And so, like you said, that's just such a beautiful example of what community is and what community does, and how we encourage each other, how we shape each other, how we introduce new ideas and new concepts to each other. It's really really cool to see that so effectively captured on screen, because some of these changes are subtle, but it's all of those subtle changes that add up to show the bigger change that we see by the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all growing together and pushing each other and spurring each other on. And the other thing that I really love about this film is that it's messy too. You know, like Community is so messy. Being in such close relationship with people and bearing your soul can be really messy, and you make mistakes. Like you see these like tiffs that come up between them with Celie and Sophia, where Celie makes the mistake of um, saying a quick line around like how Harpo should treat her and keep her in line, and she admits like, man, I was jealous of you. Like I didn't know what to say, and I said the wrong thing, and then you see this like kind of confusing relationship for a bit between Celie and Shug as well, because they're both sleeping with the same man, and it's complicated, you know. And I love that about their friendship and their sisterhood, that overcomes all of that. You know, like the glossy version of the story is that, you know, they come together and they spur each other on and it's all dandy, but sometimes it's real messy, and you make mistakes because you're a human being and you have all these difficult emotions that you're also sorting out, and you're bumping up against other people that are also figuring out their own emotions and their own difficulties and flaws, and all of the things that they carry with them as well. And so um each of these women kind of have their moments where it gets a little funky sometimes, and they choose to overcome it. They choose to continue to be there for each other, to love each other despite the ways that they might have not showed up for each other in the best way. And that is what makes that relationship feel so strong between them. It's actually not because it's fine and dandy, but because they've actually genuinely chosen each other when they could have easily walked away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's again that whole like two things can be true at once. You know,
Mm,
these personalities will clash, and yet they will continue to choose each other and support one another even when things are hard. And I
yeah.
think, again, like you were saying, like that makes those relationships even more beautiful, because we've seen the difficulties, we've seen the hard moments, the mistreatment, we've seen all of that. And so then when we see them continue to champion the other who has hurt them in the past, it it makes that bond even more beautiful. And that's just a good example of good storytelling. You know, like
Hmm.
we obviously, like, it mirrors real life, but then it also makes for a fascinating story because it's not one dimensional, and these characters feel so real, and we understand what it would look like for a really really big personality like Sophia to be in relationship with a more
Mm.
quiet personality like Celie, and there will be conflict. And so it was just so cool the way that that is written, and how both of them stand up for each other and stand up for themselves throughout too. So it's just so well written. It's brilliant.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And like I think the film does an incredible job bringing these women to life, but I've got to say, like, I'm just so intrigued to read the novel as well, because I think that there's just
Mhm.
probably this treasure trove of nuance and detail that inevitably you don't have the capacity for, because it's just a different storytelling medium on the big screen, that are just like a little bit you have time to sit with in a novel. And it'll be fascinating to be able to see the ways that the film has made choices based on the original text, and being able to see like where have this creative team chosen to focus their attention on to tell this specific type of story, to highlight these themes, like that, almost like working your way backwards comparison. I think will also be fascinating to see what this creative team has chosen to highlight and to really elevate.
Oh, yes. I'm so excited to read this novel now.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other things that were notable to you, or that kind of stood out to you as a thought or feeling, a reaction that you're having while watching The Color Purple?
One, like, there's a lot of really powerful moments throughout this film, but I think one of the most powerful for me was towards the end when Celie, she's singing a song and she is outside of her shop and she just starts singing "I'm Beautiful" while staring directly into the camera. It feels like she's staring into your soul while
Yeah.
she's singing that. And I mean, obviously, fantastic performance. Holy moly, just incredible. But I loved that for so many reasons. So like throughout the film, Celie is called some variation of ugly all throughout. She is not the pretty one. Her sister is the pretty one. She just is there. And so for her, by the end, as a character, to say, no, I am beautiful. I am not ugly. Like that's so powerful. And then I also think there's the larger like context that we're living in. And like for decades, centuries, maybe, I don't know, Black women
Mm-hmm.
being called ugly or having these unrealistic beauty standards, or whiteness is seen as beautiful and blackness is seen as other. And I think that is also part of this conversation of this Black woman who is unashamed in her skin and is able to confidently sing "I'm beautiful." And she's absolutely right. And so I thought that was such a powerful moment for both the character journey and just our
Mm-hmm.
larger society all in one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that moment just moved me so deeply, and it's an example of the way that the film is using the medium of film to its finest, to be able to communicate something different that you just can't in the other mediums, and the other mediums can communicate something differently with their logistical, tactical setups. But the fact that she's looking straight into the camera, I thought was like a brilliant choice, because people can't look you in the eye when they're saying something that they might not fully believe in yet, or that they feel unsure about, or they're insecure about, like even if they're saying it out loud, they might look away. But she holds your gaze, which I think is just such a intentional way to further showcase the point that Celia has fully realized this about herself. And she has full confidence of who she is. And she is unafraid to stare you dead in the eye that shot is like quite long too, like they don't, it's like a little moment they cut away. No, she is singing several bars just straight into the camera. And man, I just, that is a perfect way to use a close-up shot of this character, the concept of a camera, POV, us as the audience on the other side of that gaze, experiencing this moment with her, like using filmmaking at its finest in that moment.
Oh, yes. It was one of my favorite parts of this movie. I have a lot of favorite parts, but that's one of them. Like I had goosebumps just all over my body. I was like, "Oh my gosh." This like I think this movie is so special, and I think a lot of those songs that Celie has in the third act are part of what makes it so special. Like there's so many powerful moments with Celie that we get to experience in the third act that
Mm.
they're just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even this, she sings, "I am beautiful." And then the second part she sings is, "I am here." And I thought that was just
Mm-hmm.
like such
Yeah.
a concise, succinct way to string those words together because, well, for so much of the movie, we see her fade into the background. You know, she is invisible in many ways. She's invisible to Mister in a million ways. But even when she's around her friends, she's a little bit more withdrawn. She's less expressive. She it feels like she doesn't want to take up space, and it's because of the ways that she's been treated and the things that have been spoken over her around her identity that she believes that she is not worth taking up that space. But that phrase that she sings, "I am here," is such a, answer to everything that we've seen her undergo for the rest of the film. And I thought that was also just like such powerful word choice as well. So I'm sure that was in the book, and they really brought that to life here.
And even the costuming choice too, because she's wearing bright red in that
Yeah,
moment. Like you
that's
cannot
so good.
hide when you're wearing a full bright red outfit. There's no way. You cannot sink into the background. And so again, like all of these little details are coming together to communicate what's going on. I feel like sometimes in movies, like visuals will be communicating one thing and words will be communicating something else. But I feel like this movie is a really good example of all of those things working together to communicate one central thing to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. All of the things are kind of synchronous with each other. They're all helping each other, just
Mm.
like a really land a point home or an emotion home. So good. What else really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think another thing to like relate back to that is in the beginning of the film, Nettie and Celie are talking, and Nettie talks about how their ancestors were queens, which makes them royalty. And I get like I loved that was included, especially at the beginning, that these two young girls are reminding each other like, no, we are royalty, we are queens. And then obviously like Celie goes on this whole journey, and then you see her by the end and she is this like regal presence, and obviously like so is Nettie when she shows up at the end. um
Mm-hmm.
but I love that like reframing and this recontextualizing history too. Like they're we don't know what their family was like. It's not covered in this movie, but they're not defined by that. They are queens. They are descended from royalty. And so they can act like it. And then by the end of the film, Celie understands that and she is acting like that. And I love that she once she accepts her agency and once she know who she is, then she uses that like royal authority to create community and create belonging for other people. So it's just this really really beautiful example of what it means to like understand your history, understand who you are, and then that can help you like benefit the entire community. How that helps you pour into others and support others because you are doing so from a place of wholeness and healing.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I feel like this movie is so much about identity and, the ways that their identity has been given to them, spoken over them, like massaged and molded by their upbringing or the people in their lives. And then for a lot of the characters, their identity is challenged and then rebuilt and reframed. Like even even Sophia. I mean, it's very clear the identity journey that Celie fully embraces by the end of the film. But I thought that the sequence with Sophia too, she starts out the film like so strong. Like this is a woman that knows who she is and is fearless in the most contagious of ways, right? And I again, an area that the film doesn't choose to shy away from, but we see how after years in prison, like being treated the way that she did, that that has an effect on the way that she has now seen who she is and how she shows up in the world, and the transformation in the other direction that we see Sophia go through is a picture of how that identity can be like slowly graded upon to the point where this character is like a completely different person, and we see her fully then embrace that back again when she's back in her community around the people that know her, that call out that person in her to come out again and to reemerge. But uh, the ways that identities are formed, challenged, rebuilt, and then redeemed is like every character almost has this story arc. You know, even some of the side characters, even Harpo has the choice on who he believes that he is. Is he like his father? Is he like his grandfather? Or is he going to be a different man? And each of them have to make those choices and begin to walk out that healing and that wholeness.
And I think that's what makes this movie so compelling. Like, there's so many things that make it compelling and fun to watch, but the fact that each character is three-dimensional, obviously a lot of credit goes to Alice Walker and her novel, because that's an incredible foundation to build upon. But like, every character is three-dimensional. Every character goes on this pretty full character journey, and there are multiple characters. You know, you have Celie and Shug and Sophia and Mister and Harpo. Like, that's 5 characters, which is a lot to do in one movie. And yet they all go through their own journey. They all have strengths and weaknesses that we see. They have highs and lows, successes and failures. Like, we see a lot from these characters, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. You know, I feel like sometimes some movies, they'll have too many characters and try to do too much, and so then nothing works. But this works, and all of their growth, all of their struggles, because this is so wrapped up in them doing life together. It all makes sense, because as one is growing, another character may be regressing a little bit, and we see the compare and contrast between the two, or maybe two are growing together and one is outpacing the other. And so it's this really interesting like melding of their stories, and it just works the way that they all grow, and they all change and become better versions of themselves by the end. And gosh, just what incredible writing.
No, that's so true, which is that like their points in their growth are often at very wildly different points throughout. You know, like when one character's beginning to step out and walk out something new and you know, this new courage that they have, the other is regressed. And so there's this, they're not all growing at the same linear rate, you know, which just is boring. It's boring, and also it doesn't allow, again, like we were talking about earlier, the showcasing of community. Like in reality, I hope we're not all like at the bottom of the valley at the same time and also at the mountaintops at the same time, because sometimes we need each other to be like, hey, I'm at the bottom of the valley right now. I know you're doing great. Like, I need help, you know. And you see that really the ebbs and flows are not perfectly like aligned with each other for these characters, and it makes it work really well. You're right, because it draws out these different sides of each of them.
And I also love that even though we have these interesting male characters who do affect the plot and are important for the journey that Celie goes on, the film is so intentional to keep us focused on Celie and Shug and Sophia. Like, that is who we're really focusing on. And I think that's so important. You know, like, this movie is about these Black women and their journeys and their stories and their healing. And even though other things are going on with Harpo and Mister and the other guys, and they are important, they are not the focus. And so even having such well-rounded male characters, the story doesn't focus on them. And I think, again, that is a testament to the writing and knowing whose story is supposed to be told and where we are supposed to focus in this movie. And it doesn't waver from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything else is supporting and helping push their arcs forward. But you're right, it doesn't compete for the center of the stage, because these three women and their relationship with each other are, that's the stage that we're focused on. Everyone else is helping move that plot forward. That's so good. Okay, any other last thoughts about The Color Purple before we wrap?
Okay, so can we talk about the Academy's mistakes?
Yes. We love to talk about the Academy's mistakes. It's one of our favorite rants here in Movies and Us. The answer is always yes to that question. Okay, so Danielle Brooks is nominated for Best Supporting Actress. I got some thoughts.
Oh gosh. Okay. How many categories exist in the Oscars? How many of these can we give out? I would like to give a nomination to Fantasia Barrino. That's probably not how you say her last name. That's my bad. But she kills it as Celie, and I want to give her a nomination. So
that's the biggest
in
one
a
for me.
In a previous episode, in two previous episodes, we have talked about the Best Actress category, which has a lot of contention, a lot of buzz. And I was conflicted between Annette Bening and Margot Robbie, and I wanted them both to get nominations. I now retract that, and I want to put Fantasia in there, because to me, this performance outshines both of them.
I agree.
It's my biggest complaint.
I would even argue that I would be more passionate about it being included than Carey Mulligan's performance as well, if I had to rank these. Not that we're ranking things. Yeah, I think Lily Gladstone, Sandra Fuller, and Fantasia Barrino. Strongest three. We can fill in the rest from there. But because for so much of the film, she is, as the character, so muted. Like she is so withdrawn in so many of the scenes, that to still have such a presence whilst also communicating that sense of like, I just want to get out of the way, is a hard thing to do. It's not dissimilar from the kind of power of Lily Gladstone's performance as well, which is that to do that role that isn't big and expressive, and to still carry so much power in those scenes is hard. It's a hard task. It's a hard task. It's perhaps broad strokes. Again, we're painting with broad strokes, but the bigger, more expressive can really show off an actor's chops. But some of those muted, understated ones are the slow burns. Those are harder to do, I find. So I like to celebrate those.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Okay, I pulled up, we have an Oscar nominations spreadsheet. And so I've pulled up our Oscar nomination spreadsheet because I needed to know some of the other categories that we could be competing in. Obviously, costume design. Hello. Yes. Her pants at the end. Yes. You deserve it for the pants alone. I would even say, and I would have to think about this a little bit more, but there is a case to be made, I would say, for adapted screenplay. Because this is fantastic. What else we got?
I would +1 on adapted screenplay because, as I mentioned earlier, I was doing this like mental gymnastics in my head around like, is the story just this good, or is it the film that has brought that to life, or like where do I weigh this a little bit more heavily? And I think I've come to like the pacing, the choices of scenes, dialogues to include, like those are such intentional choices that this feels full and coherent. Like I didn't ever have the feeling of like, man, I feel like I'm missing some context and some details or some meat, but I know this is based on something, so I'm sure it's there, but like we're getting this version of it. I didn't have that feeling with this. So I think that's a difficult task to do. This felt full and coherent as a standalone piece, even without the context of knowing where it's come from. And that's hard to do an adaptation. So +1 on the best adapted screenplay. It's tough because
Okay,
there's a lot
so
of other good things in this category too.
it is a hard cat. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, maybe also we haven't yet seen the zone of interest. So like it's hard to make an informed decision. But there is a case to be made. I would have to like really think about it and like rank these movies. But like, okay, it deserves more than just one nomination. I'm glad that it got the one nomination it did, but it deserves a lot more than it got.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had a whole rant about how I would like to remove one of the Best Supporting Actress nominees, and
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we
yeah.
found a replacement.
Here you go. Perfect.
Yes, yes, the Taraji P Henson. I think a stronger addition to this category.
Yes, she is fantastic in
Mm-hmm.
this movie. Like, Taraji P. Henson is always fantastic, but holy moly, she brings it in this movie. And I would really have loved to see her get like the critical recognition that her performance rightly deserves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she is captivating in this film. Like, there's so many scenes where Celie is just in awe and watching Shug just do her thing in any context that she's in, and I'm like, yep, I too am totally in awe, captivated by this woman who is just, man, just the charisma that's dripping off of her. It's so palpable.
Okay, so I think we're up to 5 nominations that we've given them now. Would you
Mm-hmm.
like to give any other nominations to this movie?
Um, I I think those are the most fitting ones. You know, like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, there's some things with the cinematography that I think could have made this even better and stronger. There's some moments of film editing that, man, I was like, you got this movie, you got this. Just do more of this. Like, the one that really stands out to me is when we are kind of in this like reenactment of one of Nettie's letters, and then you're immediately cut to Mister calling Celie's name and just jolted
Mhm.
out of that. It's one of the examples of like this movie's unafraid to cut so quickly between tones and just throw you into the next scene, because that feeling of like anxiety and like, oh my gosh, like what did I do? You know, like we get to empathize with the character of Celie as the audience, because we too are being like jolted out of this moment that we were having on our own, and then thrown into this next thing. And that sense of unease, I thought the movie just captured so well with the editing, and it's something that you can't do in a production play. So it just um fully utilized the film medium in those moments. So we'd love to see more of that, but there were some really great moments like that in the movie.
Okay, so the Academy. Are you listening? You did some good things this year, but you also messed up real bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Justice for the Color Purple. I'm glad
Yes.
that it got the one nomination it did. Danielle Brooks does a fantastic job, but it deserved at least 3, if not 4, additional nominations. And
Yeah.
so, Justice for the Color Purple.
Yeah, really though. Like, I mean, we're thankful that it's nominated in this, at least this category, so that there's eyeballs on it and attention on it. Like, we are reviewing this film. I mean, partially because we are covering the Oscars this year, and then this was
Mm-hmm.
nominated. So,
Yep.
man, just more people need to watch this movie. It's such an important story and such a special way to approach this story with the medium and the genres that it's using. It's great stuff. I'm glad it's available on Max.
Yes. Yeah, me too. And it's been, or I don't know if it still is, but it was the number one movie on
Really?
Max for a while too. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 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 Because like Max is, and I mean, I don't know if these can be trusted, but like Max has also started like the top TV shows and then the top movies of the day or whatever it is. I don't remember.
Wow.
And so The Color Purple was number one there for a little while. So I'm glad that people are watching this because it is fantastic.
Mm. Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Also, little shout out to a one Steven Spielberg for using his money and his wealth to fund important stories. You know, like I think it's him and Oprah that are the one of the key producers on this film, and it's great to see him as a lover of film supporting stories that are, you know, different from the films that he would make and ever be able to make and be positioned to make, but choosing to support them in the ways that he can with his influence. So I thought that was really, really wonderful to see. Good job, Steven.
Well, and he directed the first film. He directed the earlier film. And so it's cool to see him supporting this. You know, I love that. You know, I feel like these two films are so different, even though they're telling the same story. There's no competition there because they are so different. And so it's cool to see this director going, hey, no, I want to support this new version. And like you said, Oprah, she starred as Sophia in the earlier version, and then we get a cameo from Whoopi Goldberg, who played Celie in the original version. And so it's just cool to see these people who are invested and love this story, helping to bring this to life, you know, contributing to it in small or big ways. It's just, it's so cool. This is such a powerful story, and it's great. All of the people that contributed to make this happen.
Yep. All right. Any other last thoughts before we wrap? Hit them all.
Yeah, I think my last little shout out would be for Colman Domingo, who is great in everything, and 2023 I guess was a banger year for him to have both The Color Purple and Rustin coming out. Fantastic movies, and he is able to balance all that's needed to balance in the character of Mr. and he is appropriately intimidating and vile when he needs to be, but then also he has those tender moments, and Colman Domingo just shifts and changes with all of them and gives a great performance, again, without overshadowing the women involved. And so it's this really beautiful balance that he contributes to this character,
and without oversimplifying this type of role too. To easily be a little bit, you know, just one-toned and to just play that vile character, but there's so much humanity that we do get to see in him as well. Not gonna lie, it was jarring for me the first 5 minutes of this movie where I'm like, I loved you like a couple weeks ago in Rustin. Like, I loved who you were, and now you're this very different person now. But it was just funny.
Oh, Jen, in the Spielberg version, Danny Glover plays Mr. What? And I was like, what? This no.
My.
I could not process that. It was so hard for me to understand Danny Glover in this role. Oh, I was a whole wreck while watching the movie.
Yeah. You're like, but I love you, but you're being awful right now. Yes. So I need to be mad at you. Yeah. Yes. It's great. All right. Well, this is our review and discussion of The Color Purple. You can find it available, as we mentioned earlier, on Max. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about The Color Purple. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at moviesnuspod, or email us at moviesnuspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the film The Zone of Interest as we continue on our journey to the Oscars. We hope you have an amazing week, and we hope we'll see you very soon.